one of the signings that I did not cover this offseason was Eddie Lacy going to the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Eddie Lacy is very talented. He's coming out of Alabama, and usually Alabama running backs, they're usually very good at the college level, and usually have a 50-50 shot of being a good NFL running back. Obviously, you got examples as Trent Richardson, who ended up being a disaster, but you also have examples of Sean Alexander, who ended up being very good. Now, when I look at this, I think Eddie Lacy is very talented. He obviously did better in the first 2 years of his career, but then after the last two in 2015, 2016, he just didn't seem as successful. Obviously, you had a big weight concern. And when he signed in Seattle, he actually had this contract where he gets a bonus based off of how much weight he loses and all that. And it's great. He's actually making a lot of progress of it. He has one coming up pretty soon. He already passed his last two weight checkups, and he's going for his third one. But overall, when I look at Eddie Lacy, when he was in Green Bay, he did pretty well for inside zone runner in there for his first 2 years. And usually people who are your inside runner in Green Bay aren't very good. That's why they had John Kuhn during those early years as a fullback to really deal with those inside runs. Because inside running, for some reason, in Green Bay, they seem to struggle a lot because it just seems as if that when it comes to the quarterbacks, obviously they just have such great quarterbacks versus they would prefer a tailback, a more outside kind of runner. If you look at Amon Green back in the day, he was also a Seattle Seahawk when he first started out, but eventually became a Green Bay Packer, and he's one of these guys who has like a lot of speed, used for a lot of receiving, but obviously you don't really need a receiving back in Green Bay. But when you look at Eddie Lacy, he was definitely a bigger running back, and usually the smaller, more balanced running backs are usually the better for Green Bay versus the bigger ones. And for a guy who did that, he ran for almost 1,200 yards in his first 2 seasons, which is pretty good for inside runners, so you're getting something good there. And also, when I look at Seattle, Seattle is very good with coaching running backs. Ever since they had Sean Alexander, it feels as if the running game has always been a quality. Maybe not last season. I know the running game has definitely had some ifs right there, especially with Thomas Rawls' injury. But you definitely get to see something in C.J. Prosise. And C.J. Prosise lit up the Patriots' defense on that Sunday Night Football game in Foxborough. Did a very good job. He had 150 all-purpose yards, and I believe that concludes his receiving and his rushing yards. And I look at that, pretty good. I know Christian Michael, he had some unsuccess eventually. I think they got rid of him. He might have re-signed with them, whatever. But anyway, when I look at this, when I look at Seattle, they do very good with running backs because Marshawn Lynch would not be what we remember him as today if he never got traded during the 2010 season, because definitely Seattle made him into a great running back and a guy that might be a Hall of Famer one day. And when I look at that Seattle coaching is definitely something very good. And I think that you're looking at Eddie Lacy. I think Eddie Lacy might be re-signed by Seattle during the 2018 offseason. Yes, I'm very high on Eddie Lacy right now just because in Seattle, I think he's going to work very well. And when I look at that, I just think that they have so much better coaching there versus Green Bay. Green Bay likes a lot more outside runners. Ahmad Greed, they had James Starks, they had Ty Montgomery out there just this season. They like guys who can run on the outside, guys with a little bit more speed, a little bit more balance versus their big bruising running back. It's just how it works in the West Coast offense. But for a guy, he did pretty well for a 1,200-yard rusher in that offense when Eddie Lacy was playing. Now, when I look at it, I think this would definitely help because the Seattle Seahawks definitely struggled for rushing this year. They had 1,500 yards for the years before 2016. Between 2012 and 2015, they at least ran for 2,200 yards and ran up to 2,700 yards, and that was in 2014. So obviously, they're definitely going to need some help running the ball. Also, I thought Russell Wilson had his worst season last year, and yet he's still a good quarterback. I'm not denying that. I did say he was overrated. I did. Also, I did make a video on Russell Wilson versus Andrew Luck, a debate. I also made a video on how Russell Wilson is overrated. Click in the links in the description if you are interested in seeing this after you're done watching this video. Now, when Russell Wilson in 2016, he threw for 21 touchdowns, which was his second fewest, and then 11 picks, which were his most, and still that's not statistically terrible compared to even for, like, if you look at him, ideally the least amount of picks he's thrown in a season is 8, and the most amount of touchdowns is 34, but he's usually a 20 touchdown kind of person. And when I look at that, I think when it comes to rushing, he's definitely better when you have rushing the ball, because in 2016, where he had his worst statistics, is when they had the least amount of yards gained through running the football. And so when I look at that, I think it's definitely a big deal. And I look at Seattle, putting Eddie Lacy here will really help out that defense, because I think in the last 2 seasons what happened with Seattle is they just weren't as successful as defensively, where they couldn't just push the ball, and thus when you had struggles running ball ever since Marshawn Lynch got older in 2015, and also with the trade of Max Unger for Jimmy Graham. Not saying that's a bad trade, it's just it hurt their O-line out there, and it hurt the idea of how production for Eddie Lacy. But I just look at that and think to myself, if they could run the ball, this will help out their defense tremendously. Not so much that the defense needs some help, but their defense isn't the same stature that it was in 2013, unfortunately, because in 2013, obviously, you're talking about a fantastic defense. I think an all-time great defense. I think on the NFL top 10, they ranked it top 10, and I think that's a fair decision. The reason why I thought that Legion of Boom defense was so freaking good was because they are playing an era where it is so easy for the wide receivers, if you want to talk about some wide receiver privilege right there. And when I look at that, I just think of when I look at that, it just, when they play so physically, they tackle so well, that was such a great defense. Their defense is still very, very good, though. I just feel like if you put a running back there, that's definitely going to help their defense out. And you're looking at a team that should get 11 wins and maybe make it to the conference finals. I think that's where you're looking at right here, because I think that would be extremely helpful right there if you have that run game. And I just look at that, and I think Eddie Lacy will bring that impact. Will he be as good as Marshawn Lynch? Maybe. I don't think so. But you're definitely doing good, have a good running back. Now, he is only here for a 1-year deal, and obviously, even though I'm talking so highly of him, giving him that 1-year deal makes a lot of sense, because he is overweight, so there's still a chance that he doesn't develop. And also, he had some injuries in the past and all that with the weight, and so you can't really give him a lot of trust yet. He's not this all-time great player. You know, I'm talking to this guy like he is the next Emmitt Smith or something. But I just look at Lacy, and he's a very good pass blocker, which is going to be very good for Seattle, because the Seattle Seahawks O-line, it isn't the greatest in the world. Really, they don't. They had a better O-line in 2013 when they had Okung, Unger. I believe J.R. Sweezy might have been on there. He may or may not have been on that team, but I just look at that and think to myself, you got pass block there, that would definitely help out Russell Wilson. Also, just having that power run game. You know how Marshawn Lynch was. He has a power run game. And a lot of people, when you look at Eddie Lacy, in 2013 and 2014, they were comparing Eddie Lacy to Marshawn Lynch a little bit. I think there is some similarities in how they play. Obviously, Marshawn Lynch, though, if at an evaluative way, was obviously a much better running back. And I know there's some running backs they all compare to Marshawn Lynch. I know LeGarrette Blount gets compared a lot to Marshawn Lynch. Yeah, I don't even think Blunt's that close to what Marshawn Lynch has career-wise. Now, when I look at this, I just think that Eddie Lacy should definitely help. Now, as a receiver, I think C.J. Prosise is your main back right there when it comes to receiving. C.J. Prosise was a wide receiver from Notre Dame. They converted him to running back. And also Thomas Rawls, I think you should still see some carries. So I'm looking at this. You're looking at Eddie Lacy, who could be a real bell cow running back, a guy you could really hand off the ball, and a guy who could break tackles is what Seattle wants. Also, you get C.J. Prosise as a receiver, and then you get Thomas Rawls as a backup, who's a very good one-cut in my opinion. The only issue about him is the injuries, but you got yourself a pretty good running back. So when I look at this, Eddie Lacy, I have very high expectations for him, and if you have him in fantasy football, I think you find yourself a very, very nice halfback to rely on and a very fun running back to watch and root for. Now, I'm just going to give you an update. I usually upload daily. I upload every day. But one thing for sure was this past weekend, I was away for on some business to do, some family stuff, so I wasn't able to upload some videos, so I was away and all that. I hope you guys will probably understand. My link in the description of my last video, which was on the decline of the 49ers. Remember them in 2012 when they made it to the Super Bowl? Now they're the second worst team from last year, so click on that if you're interested. I'll see you guys later. Peace.